So I guess this is our last episode before the season in review.
Oh yeah, I guess so.
And Kai's going to host it.
I'm gonna host for the first time ever.
Whoa.
I think in this case, it just means I'm gonna be playing as Dad.
Ooh, role play.
I'm Leonardo this time.
Okay. All right, well, Leonardo, take us away.
So many of our favorites to watch. Oh, look, now they're being bashed. I guess that's what we should expect on the Bullied Nostalgia Podcast.
Hello there, listeners, and welcome to the Bullied Nostalgia Podcast. I am joined by Timothy.
Hey.
You've never gone first, have you?
I'm not Leonardo. Yeah, I'm Raph here or something.
You're struggling. I'm also joined by Jonathan.
Yep.
And Chance.
I think I'm Donatello now.
No, I think you are Raphael and Kai's Donatello and I mixed it up.
Hey, you claimed Raph.
Okay, I'll be Raph. It's fine. What? You are making me so angry.
And I am Cork. I, of course, am Kylan.
I'm Cork.
Bullied Nostalgia is the podcast where we look back at old TV shows, movies, and other media from our childhoods and tear them to shreds. If you want to tell the members of the podcast anything, any movies that might be repressed so far that we can't even think about them, or your thoughts on the podcast itself, you can contact us at BulliedPod@gmail.com. If you are looking for some frankly mediocre clothing to wear, you can find our stuff on Redbubble under...
Frankly, mediocre should be our catchphrase. That's really funny. Kylan, I feel like you got a really good shirt out of that deal.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm making a very good sales pitch. So, today, we watched Sesame Street, Follow That Bird.
Follow That Bird is a movie from when I was little.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I guess we should say who it's nostalgia for.
Well, it's kind of nostalgia for you, because even though this movie came out when I was a babe,
Wee babe.
it's still...
You're still a babe.
Oh, John, you say the sweetest things.
This has officially gotten weird.
Yeah, Sesame Street Follow That Bird is a movie spin-off of the famous TV show. We can talk about the TV show if we want a bit too, but this movie came out in 1985 and was not a success. We don't really know how much it cost to make, but we suspect it's around $8 million. And the box office only made $14 million. It got absolutely destroyed by a ton of other huge movies that year. It just got trampled. That doesn't mean it's not a good movie, though. Despite being a financial flop, it has a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty good.
Wow.
It is quite good. And mayhaps for good reason.
Yeah, but just to be clear, there's only 12 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes.
They're all Kylan.
I don't know who that other guy is, but he disliked it.
And I'm sure those people who rated it weren't like, oh, I'm going to go back and rewatch this before I rate it. They definitely were like, oh, yeah, I remember this from my childhood and liked it.
Just to clarify, that
John's
isn't...
coming down hard out the gate.
John...
John's pretty unhappy. That is actually not how Rotten Tomatoes works, John. When it comes to old movies, it takes the reviews that they received at the time. That is how Citizen Kane dropped from its 100%. They found an old negative review from it. But yeah, let's find out what this movie is.
Yeah, so Chance, do you care to give us the story?
Sure. This movie is about Big Bird, as mentioned in the name. The idea is Big Bird, after a society of birds realizes he's living among non-birds, recognizes that he must be more happy with other birds. So one Madam Finch finds Big Bird and relocates him to a family called the Dodos. However, Big Bird realizes that he's not happy with the Dodos, so he begins a trek back home, not realizing, of course, that he's across the country. It's then up to Big Bird's friends on Sesame Street, Madam Finch, who's attempting to relocate Big Bird again, and a group of ne'er-do-wells who attempt to all catch Big Bird in order to rescue him, free him, or relocate him. And shenanigans ensue.
Pretty good
Pretty
summary.
good.
So, do you have any more things to tell us about...
Facts?
Yeah, I feel like you usually go into facts right after this.
Sure, yeah. I can talk a little bit about facts. I guess the reason why this movie got made is because Sesame Street is an absolute juggernaut.
Yes.
Sesame Street first started airing in November of 1969. This movie was filmed after the 15th season.
Of 55.
That's right. Sesame Street now has 55 seasons, and
Good
that
Lord.
statement might age well because we are currently in the last season of Sesame Street. HBO has said that they will not be doing new episodes, but hopefully someone else picks them up. Otherwise, there will forever only be 4,731 episodes. The show has done phenomenally well. It's won 222 Emmy Awards.
Yes.
And 11 Grammys, which, like, there's no shows that come close to that.
Yeah, it really makes One Piece look like a jump.
It does make
Now-
One Piece look like a chump.
It's worse than that, though, because there are 160 versions of Sesame Street across 70 languages. Some of these other languages have more episodes in them. The Dutch version has 4,800 episodes.
Oh, wow. I have lots to say about this show and this movie. Obviously, it was made for a reason. Sesame Street was strong, has been strong for the last 50 years. But I'm intrigued by how quick John was to jump to taking a dump on this movie. John, do you want to share your feelings towards this movie?
As a kid, I would watch Sesame Street, but never this movie. So no nostalgia.
Do you
This
remember this
movie-
movie at all?
I don't ever remember seeing this movie.
Okay.
This movie was not super well made, and it's not so bad that it's good. So it might have been the worst experience watching something on this podcast. No nostalgia, it's not great, and it's not bad enough to be great.
I think we
It was
found
just
our
really
Raphael.
boring.
John, that's how a lot of my experiences go on
Yeah,
this
John,
podcast.
you're sounding a lot like Chance right now. Are you sure you weren't asleep for this movie?
No, I was definitely awake.
No, he's
I
saying,
watched it today at 1 p.m.
No.
he's asking John if John was asleep.
Oh, yeah, John might have been asleep.
Why
Sounds
would
like-
you question my, like, we're calling back to season 1, Batman Forever, I was tired once?
No,
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 no.
he's saying you are currently filling the Chance role of the podcast.
You must have watched it while you were asleep.
Yeah,
If-
unfortunately, you
if-
said bad things, John, which makes you the heel and obviously the one who's asleep.
Yeah.
They have to disqualify my opinion by saying I was asleep?
Yes, that's how it goes.
But the thing is that Chance literally sleeps during the movies. But I'm just trying to push things off on Chance. They're trying to turn us against each other, Chance.
Chance,
I know.
Chance, tell us about your 1 p.m. experience.
I'm not on the side that John is, that there's no redeeming qualities. I don't think that's true. I think Easygoing is a great song. I love that song. The rest of the songs are passable. But I mean, having at least one great song is more than what 90% of Land Before Time movies can say. So that's a start.
That's true. I completely agree. Easy Going is a bop.
It's
It is
actually
so
genuinely good.
I also love, but I mean, this also is a throwback to Chance. I do love Grouches of the World Unite.
Yep. Awesome. Grouch is the best character in this movie by far.
I
love Oscar.
He's awesome.
I
actually.
also agree
Hold on.
with Chance.
Wait, hold on.
Have you been looking through my notes, Chance?
Are we all? I think we are becoming the Michelangelo, and John is Raphael. I think we've solved
Three
it.
Michelangelos and one Raphael.
Can we talk about Grouches of the World Unite? What relevance does that have to this movie?
None. That's why it's the best part. It has no reason for
John-
existing and still does.
John,
Okay, so I see. We're gonna say the bad things about this movie are good. Okay.
No, it's breaking the fourth wall. There's so many movies that are famous in pop culture for doing that, and it itself is a reference to a famous movie. The reason why I wanted to reference Grouches of the World Unite is, even though I probably knew that Kylan had seen this movie, we had never really talked about this movie until about 6 years ago. I remember distinctly we were walking around outside. It was near McDonald's. There's an old hotel there. I don't remember why we were outside or what we were doing, but Chance was having a bad day and he was not having a good time. I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Grouches of the World Unite. And there was an awkward silence for about 3 seconds. And Kai turns to me and he says, Dad, did you just reference Sesame Street, Follow That Bird? And I was like, yes, yes, I did. So that's probably why we're watching this now.
Yeah.
Is because of that conversation then. That is a story that I love so much because that was before I had really started to share my love of pop culture with you guys. Half of everything I say is a reference or a quote to a movie. And rarely do people pick up on it because they're such deep cuts like Sesame Street, Follow That Bird.
Yeah, Dad says pop culture, but nothing he's ever referenced has been in the large zeitgeist. It's just his own personal fascination.
Is it unpop culture?
No.
Unpopular
I think
culture?
it'd be like pop
Yeah.
culture, like obscure. Yeah.
Unpop culture.
Anti-pop culture.
I disagree with John. I have not watched this movie in many, 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 many years. Honestly, I probably watched it, Chance, with you when you were like 4, but I watched this movie, I think, in theaters, in all honesty. But back then, rewatching a movie was very difficult. Movies did not come out other than in theaters. We didn't have this on VHS. I honestly do not know how many times in my life I've actually seen this movie. So even though I don't have it memorized by any means, there is nostalgia baked in to my heart of hearts. And I just had a lot of fun. There's a lot of things that I liked, but I agree with Chance. Oscar the Grouch steals the show for me in this movie. For listeners, Big Bird is missing. He's essentially, yes, a giant 10-foot creature, but he's got the mental capacity of a preschooler.
Mm-hmm. He's actually 6 years old.
Okay, 6 years old.
That's what it said, right?
Yeah. Everyone on Sesame Street splits up in their various vehicles and they try and find him so that they can save him because he's just wandering aimlessly across the states. Who knows what's going to happen to him? Everyone has Big Bird front of mind except Oscar the Grouch, who's really just using it as an opportunity to go on a road trip to all the worst places and see all of the Grouch sites of the U.S. He drags Maria along with him, and he's just the best. I loved it.
It's genuinely incredible.
Yes, it's very funny, and John apparently hates it for some reason.
We'll get into the stuff that John hates in a little bit here, but in the meantime, I guess I'll rattle off a couple facts. This was the last movie that Jim Henson would voice Kermit the Frog before his passing.
That's crazy. Does that mean that Jim Henson never got to see Elmo's rise to fame?
Jim Henson never got to see Elmo's rise to fame.
That's insane.
Actually, that's another great touch point here is when I watched this movie and I watched Sesame Street, Elmo was not a big deal. And you actually get to see him for about 3 seconds in the end of this movie. He was still an unnamed character. Elmo was not popular. He was not famous. He wouldn't become famous until he got a puppeteer, probably a year or two after this movie. And then he would become one of the mainstays of Sesame Street. But it was so strange to me growing up that Elmo became so huge because Elmo wasn't even a part of my Sesame Street. Mm-hmm. This movie was done in Canada, in Toronto, on the cheap. All of the puppeteers are back. Frank Oz and Jim Henson are doing Bert and Ernie. And they literally did the upside down world in an airplane dangling high above the ground. I guess Jim Henson had a blast and Frank Oz got real sick and did not enjoy it. Oh, and the other fun piece of trivia that I have here is the little girl, Ruthie, that Big Bird sings Easy Going with. Her name is Allison Court. And she would grow up to become Lunette on the big comfy couch. Nobody here knows what that is or cares. Okay,
I don't know what that is.
I might delete that later.
I was moderately impressed by that piece of trivia.
Moderately. You pleased the Emperor. That piece of trivia has wet my palate for a moment.
Going back to the other trivia you said, when we were watching the airplane scene, I was staring at it, I was like, how did they do this? And you said out loud, yeah, apparently Frank Oz was terrified during this. And I was like, wait, you're telling me that they are puppeteering in a plane upside down? Yeah, insane, I guess.
Insane. When I watched this movie previously, and even still, I'm not entirely sure, I didn't really understand Snuffleupagus. Snuffleupagus is never seen with any of the other characters. Mm-hmm. So he is either Big Bird's imaginary friend or he could be Big Bird's imaginary friend. Like no one else believes that Snuffy exists. Were you guys aware of that?
No.
Yes. I think there was eventually a later episode of Sesame Street where he was maybe eventually revealed to be real. But for those who don't know, he's like an anteater woolly mammoth without ears or tusks.
And really long eyelashes.
His eyes are oddly droopy and hardly open.
Combination.
He seems like maybe the most poorly manufactured puppet. And his voice is like echoey and you can barely hear it.
This description that you just gave sounds like the most amazing puppet of all time. How is this a criticism, John?
Yeah, so imagine a cross between Eeyore, an anteater, and a woolly mammoth. But
imagine a cross between Eeyore, an anteater, and a mop.
John, we like to circle back to our favorite actors. And this movie has Dave Thomas back, who was in Boris and Natasha. That didn't win you over at all. He's essentially playing the exact same character.
Well, I think if there was someone who was going to win me over, it would be Count Floyd.
We haven't done anything of his on the podcast, John.
No, but for those who don't know, there's an actor named Joe Flaherty, and he was one of the villains in this movie trying to steal Big Bird alongside the Boris and Natasha guy. Growing up, we owned a VHS in our house called Making Real Funny Home Videos, starring the hilarious Count Floyd.
Is that guy?
And yeah, it is a character of Joe Flaherty, And I highly recommend it is on YouTube. Please go pause this episode and type in
Gross,
making real
no.
funny
No,
home videos.
keep
Don't
on, keep
do
on listening to
that.
us. Keep on listening to us. You want to stay here.
Sometimes we do say, if you want to do something quality or spend your time wisely, turn off our podcast and tune into something else. You are not getting a better deal by tuning in to that video. It is on YouTube. Our podcast sucks, but that is worse than what you're listening to right now. Okay, so I'm not sure how deep down the rabbit hole we want to go, but I do maybe want to give a quick story summary to people who don't know what Sesame Street is. Sesame Street is a children's programming TV show that, as I mentioned, was created in 1969. Joan Gance Cooney and Lloyd Morissette started working together in 1966 to combat the addictive traits that came with television. And they thought rather than trying to get kids to stop watching television, they would try and teach them something with television. And so they created this program that strung together short form media because they knew kids had short attention spans, and each little commercial or segment was a different type of media, right? Like it might be a cartoon, it might be a Muppet. And so very much we're seeing that stuff really leaned into nowadays with Coco Melon and YouTube Shorts and all these things. Kids really do not have attention. So they were ahead of the game. They built this show around people hanging out on the street and talking and learning lessons. And what they found was that in study groups, kids paid way more attention during the short form content with the Muppets. And so they asked Jim Henson if Jim Henson could create some Muppets that would interact with humans on the street. And so that's where they came up with characters like Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch. And it would become this massive success that it still is to this day. Essentially, Jim Henson painted himself in a corner because he never wanted the Muppets to be for kids, but that's a completely different story. All I will say is if you're interested about any of this stuff, there is a series of documentaries that outline Jim Henson's life and the different chapters of the Muppets through history. One devoted specifically to Sesame Street on YouTube by Defunctland. And if you are at all interested in any Muppet history, those videos are incredibly well put together. John.
Hey.
Time for your intervention.
I want to chat about my favorite scene in the movie. Not because I want you to tear it down, but just because I want some input as to why
you're this way.
Why we're coming at it from different perspectives. And like you said, not having any nostalgia for it could certainly be part of it. At the climax of this movie, some guys who own a carnival have locked Big Bird in a cage. All of the members of Sesame Street show up and are going to try and break him out of this cage while the bad guys are nearby sleeping. Maria and the other humans are trying their best to help Big Bird. The Muppets all cannot help themselves and are being far more of a nuisance than good. One of the characters is trying to steal the keys to the cage from one of the bad guys, and the other bad guy is sleeping snuggled with a box of cookies. Cookie Monster is like crawling all over this guy to get the cookies. Meanwhile, they get the keys, and there's like 30 keys on this keychain.
And Big Bird's like, did you try that one? How about that one? Yeah. Did you try that one, though?
Yeah,
I'll try that one next.
Big Bird won't stop talking the whole time, and every key that they try, the count is like 1 key, 2 keys. And so he's sabotaging them, and then friggin' Grover switches to Super Grover and is trying to bend the bars, and he's like, "Rah!" Everything is just a complete disaster. And I just love it. It's so charming. That's my favorite part of the movie. How about you, Chance?
I think it is Grouch's The World Unite. It's my favorite part of the movie.
It's good.
More than anything else, it's just the perfect amount of Oscar the Grouch. There's literally no one else on screen.
I think you're right. Things that I learned as an adult watching this movie, there's still a number of the Sesame Street characters that I can really appreciate as an adult. Ernie is not one of them.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid,
Ernie is like a psychopath. Bert's like, I'm not having fun. This is terrifying. And then Ernie's like, oh, yes, let's keep on going. Let's do this more. And then Bert's like, oh, actually, I am having fun. And Ernie's like, let's stop doing it then.
Yeah, as a kid, I think I related more to Ernie, and now I'm just like, Bert,
Get out
ask
of there.
around. Someone's gonna take you in. You do not need to live in that level of harassment every day. That poor guy.
I feel like I can relate to Ernie in that regard. I think I find some joy in other people's suffering.
Is this how we're winning you over to this movie, John? You're like, there are characters that everyone dislikes.
If you guys collectively don't like Ernie, then I'm all Ernie.
What are your guys' thoughts on Grover in this movie?
I love
There.
Grover.
At the very beginning of the movie, Big Bird is talking to all the people of Sesame Street, getting advice or whatever. And then he turns over to Grover, and Grover says, don't forget to breathe! In and out! Thank you, Grover.
I'm not going to pretend he's an idiot, but he is an enjoyable idiot.
I think as a kid, I would get Grover and Gonzo mixed up
Yeah,
when I was quite young.
Oh, I
I
can
did that
see
too.
that energy.
they both have a higher pitched gravelly voice. They're both bluish. They both have the G-O sound in their name. There's a lot in common there.
I can see that energy, John, for sure. Gonzo gets shot out of a cannon with a cape on. Grover puts on a helmet and flies with a cape
yeah.
on. Like,
This movie's puppeteering is crazy. And, like, that goes for all Muppets. There are so many scenes where it's like, I just don't know how they could even do that. It's like the simplest of motions. It's just like, I just don't understand how that looks so realistic. But somehow, just like the weirdest thing, there's a scene where Grover's flying around and he falls forwards. And you can just see the stick that he's held up by, which feels really sloppy for the Jim Henson Company.
yeah.
It's really weird because, like, the rest of the movie, the puppeteering is incredible, and then you can just see the stick that he's held up by. It's like having a boom mic in the middle of the movie.
I will say, I guess that's a closing remark more than anything. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about before we go to closing?
So there's this one scene where Big Bird gets captured by the bad guys, and he's painted blue to try to make him look like a different bird. And he sings a song in this circus about how sad he is. And the audience is made up of 100% twins, I guess.
That is so weird. Did you guys notice how many twins there were in the audience?
Yeah, that is weird.
I didn't.
Yeah, they were like all twins.
In The Matrix, there's a scene where Neo's in training, and everyone he walks past, they're supposed to be duplicates. And so the Wachowskis hired every twin they could find in the area to give that visual effect.
Mm-hmm.
So that you feel like you're in a simulation because everybody looks the same. What was the purpose?
No, I'm thinking about it. From the years of Sesame Street I've watched, this isn't exclusive to the movie. This happens in the show itself. There will be scenes where you'll see Grover talking to twins. Right?
Yeah, but not all at the same time.
Yeah. This is probably more important. The message of this movie feels a little bit iffy. Because sure, yeah, it's you don't have to be with people that look or sound like you. But it is also a bird notices a 6-year-old child is sleeping on the street, goes to help him, and then proceeds to become the bad guy for it.
Yeah, essentially the social worker who's trying to find Big Bird a healthy home is the bad guy because Big Bird's on the run because Big Bird doesn't understand. He's a 6-year-old boy and he just doesn't want to be where he's been told he needs to go. But the whole movie could have been avoided if he just said, I want to go back home. I don't like it here. They don't really explain anything to her until the last 3 minutes of the movie.
The ending of the movie is literally, you like it here? Yes. Okay. And then that's it.
Well,
Yeah, I did get the impression that it could be, for some kids, not helpful messages, because the social worker is trying to reunite him with other birds, and it's framed in a really negative light. And I get that Sesame Street's all about promoting diversity, which is great, but it almost felt like it was bad for him to be placed with his race. And then also felt like he was really justified in running away from home. And so I just feel like if you were a kid who was a foster child or adopted during that time, you'd be like, yeah, like, I do not want to be with
these
this new
dodos.
family. I want to run away. Yeah,
It became a big insult around that period of time.
Well, I feel like we're already pretty much there. Let's jump to close, hey?
we're not going to talk about the dodo birds?
You don't want to talk about it in closing?
Sure,
I
I'll
want to talk about the dodo.
John, your closing is going to be all the things you don't like. Unless you all of a sudden like the dodos, I'm sure you can loop that in.
Well, I want to find out if you guys like the dodos or not, so I can decide if I like them or not.
No comment.
Oh, are you editing out the parts that you don't like, Tim? Are you not allowed to say those?
No, I'm just not giving you any ammunition.
So, John, I would consider the dodos to be an incredibly well-acted bad guy because you're supposed to hate them. So, they're just really good at acting. I think they might be the best characters in the movie.
That was pretty good, Kai.
Thank you.
That sounded a lot like John.
Why would you say that?
I'm just saying, if listeners are trying to determine what's genuine, is this a good or bad movie, and they get the sense that you guys refuse to say anything bad, I mean, they might trust my take on it.
Okay,
John,
well,
hyped about
give us your
Grover's
take on it.
stick.
Okay, here's my take. I think that it is hard to make a movie work really well around Big Bird. The idea behind him is he's this very unassuming big character that's very childish and innocent and a bit maybe dopey. If you had a really good writing team and a really good script, you could still make that work, but he's not the most interesting character to follow. And so then what really surprises me is that the Muppet movie, which I adore, but again, keep in mind I have a nostalgia for it, came out 6 years before Follow That Bird. And the Muppet movie, granted, is geared more towards adults. But I think what I forgot about Sesame Street is this is actually geared towards preschoolers because it's made for preschoolers. All the human characters are very flat and have really no personality. They're really kind of the characters who just kind of come alongside and say like, yeah, that's the letter Z. There's just not much to them. And again, I know I've become acclimatized to more fast-moving films in recent years, but this movie feels very slow, like they unnecessarily linger on shots. It just really feels like a preschool show from the 70s, even though it's from the 80s, that's been extended into a really long feature film. Again, if I was in preschool in the 70s, I'm sure this would be a banger. But because I have no nostalgia for that, so my inner child isn't going back to watch this movie. It was really hard to watch. Even though I really do treasure the Sesame Street characters, I think they're great. This is not a reflection of how I feel about Sesame Street, but how I feel about this movie.
Is this the first movie we've done on the podcast, John, that you'd never seen before? Is this the first thing that you've had absolutely no nostalgia for, apart from Dougal, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah,
What
so
about the
really
more modern things we've gone through?
Well, we watched Treasure Planet and Jumanji.
Yeah, even the newer stuff, Chance, like when we talk about Descendants, John says he has nostalgia for the time that we spent together when we watched it the first time. Or Christmas in Wonderland, he talked about nostalgia for the mall more than the movie.
Yes. Because again, Dougal, even though I hadn't seen it, was so bad, it was funny. And so this might be just like this jarring experience where I'm in Chance and Kylan's shoes, watching an old movie that's mediocre.
With no redeeming quality.
So putting yourself in Chance and Kylie's shoes.
I feel like we need to do this to Tim now to get him to
How do you feel about continuing this podcast? Are you like, oh my goodness, is this what they have to go through every time?
Yes, it is.
As long as they can stay in their role and I can stay in mine, I'm good. The empathy doesn't make me want to change anything.
I agree with John that Big Bird is the weakest part of this movie, which is ironic that he is the core through line of the whole thing. His story with the dodos is not fun or interesting. The only thing that Big Bird brings that I'm captivated by is the puppeteering. Kai and I played a game where we tried to hold our hand above our head and pretend like we were operating Big Bird the whole movie.
For context, I think I almost lost my arm.
The blood stopped running to his hand because for people who don't know, Big Bird's like this 8-foot tall puppet, but the human is, looking out of his chest. His head is operated by a hand that's straight up. And so I do think it's interesting, like when he was riding in the truck and those types of things. But yes, he's essentially a nothing character. But that's where my agreement with John comes to an end. I do have love for this movie. And this is one of the few movies that we've watched in the last 3 years. I don't know why or when, but I will watch this movie again. It is for kids. John is right. I don't know that the characters are all flat. I think Maria is just a genuinely wonderful human. She was probably the human that stole the show most in this movie. But I love Grouches of the World Unite. Oscar the Grouch kills it.
Grover kills it.
Grover's amazing. The Count was super fun too. So many of these characters blur the lines. And I think that was always the goal with Muppets and Sesame Street, was blurring the lines between these Muppets and real life humans to put so much personality into this felt that you would believe that it's more than just a cushion or a chunk of foam.
A jacket with tennis ball eyes, or golf ball eyes.
I really appreciated some of the characters, and some of the songs are really fun too. So
even the ones that aren't very good are pretty fun.
Yeah, there are no songs in this movie that are as bad as the better songs in a Land Before Time movie. I like what Chance said about that earlier. I concur.
Run around.
That's it from me giving the exact polar opposite of John's review. Sorry, bud.
Is it my turn then?
Yes, it is. Sorry, I'm hosting. I get to go last.
Okay, I have made my statement about Oscar the Grouch being the best, but I am going to be honest. I really like certain parts of this movie. I think they're very fun and good, but I wouldn't say those necessarily rescue the whole movie. As mentioned before, Big Bird is a nothing character. And unfortunately, when the person with the most screen time isn't fun to watch, that says something about most of the scenes. I like parts of this movie, but it's not a great movie. It's obviously aimed at toddlers, and the Minions are aimed at toddlers, At a certain point, you don't have to try hard to appease a certain audience.
Land Before Time
and so,
4 was made for toddlers.
There are parts of this movie I would rate at a 4, but if we're rating the movie in its totality, it's probably a 2. I had fun, but that doesn't mean it's a good movie.
Sure.
So you're saying that you maybe had a negative 4 experience?
I wouldn't say I had a negative experience because I don't think this movie was bad good. The parts that I liked about this movie were things that I liked because they were good.
He's saying overall the movie is a good movie, but there's too much dragging it down to be a great movie.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the parts of this movie I disliked were because they were bad. I disliked them because they were a nothing movie.
Okay.
Big Bird's journey and the scenes with Big Birds in them aren't entertaining even from a poor perspective they're just not entertaining to begin with. The scenes that I didn't like weren't because they were so bad it was enjoyable again. It was because I didn't even want to be watching them. Although I had a lot of fun with certain parts in this movie, overall, I think the experience did not lead very much credence to the film as a whole. So I'm probably going to give this a 2, but Oscar in my heart, he's always ranked higher than that.
Oscar's a 5.
You should watch Elmo.
Yeah,
Grouch
Oscar's a
Landis.
5.
Yeah, I think if I was using chance of scale, this would be the closest to a 0 movie.
Wow.
Sorry.
Out of everything we've watched?
That we've watched, yeah.
You gave Titan
Wow.
AE
Dougal.
a 0 before.
I did?
Yeah.
No. Okay, well, if I did, and there's something called Sub-Zero, that's what Sesame
No,
Street
you're
call
just
that
plain
phrase.
0.
Wow.
Sub-Zero.
It really sucks when people bring up your past rankings, doesn't it?
You are the champs
You
of this
are.
episode.
Actually, this is incredible.
Chance, I just want to give a quick shout out to you for that last slam dunk on your uncle. Okay, over to you.
Yeah, I get to do
Kai.
mine. The things that the Henson Company did in this movie are incredible. The performers, the set dressing, the Muppets themselves, it's all so good. The amount of times I would see like a little detail and I'd be like, oh my goodness, that's so fun. The Count's license plate is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Every little section of the movie felt so personalized, which I thought was just really nice.
When the Count counted the credits
Yes,
at the end.
that was really fun. Yeah, just like the props and the puppets themselves were so good. I cannot praise it enough. Yes, there were honestly terrible characters in this movie, but I don't think at the end of the day that really matters. This is a preschooler's movie. I enjoyed myself a lot for what it was. There was a lot of really funny characters and great bits. The very first scene, I said it to Dad out loud. I was like, this movie's actually good. And he was like, yeah. So for a ranking, I will give it a hubcap.
Okay.
That's clever.
Yeah.
For people who haven't watched this movie, Cookie Monster eats a car.
Yeah.
So that's what he's referencing.
Yeah, so that's my cookie rating.
As a kid, one of my earliest nightmares was that I was playing with our Force Ghost Obi-Wan Kenobi toy in Tim's bedroom on a blue desk. And then I turned and went into the hallway upstairs and Cookie Monster jumped on me when he started tickling me. And I tried calling to my parents for help, who I could see at the kitchen table, but they couldn't hear me because I couldn't breathe because he was tickling me so hard. And that went on for a long time, and then I woke up.
That
can't be real. I've known you for a long time, and I know your reputation at this point. But that can't be real.
The oldest nightmare I can remember is also Muppet related, and it was reoccurring. So my nightmare was that the Christmas Carol versions of Statler and Waldorf, the Heckler Muppets, they're the ghosts. My nightmare was that they would drag me out of my bed through the ceiling up into the sky and then drop me.
when you talk about Cookie Monster, you expect him to eat something, but no. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen him tickle anybody.
He's the tickle monster.
What do you think he's doing to those cookies before he eats them? And maybe we're piecing together that the Muppets are things of nightmare and they've visited us all. But Jim Henson was the one to bring his nightmares to life.
I don't know what bit we're on anymore. I'm lost.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up. I appreciate this episode. It sounds like we have quite a wide array of feelings about it, so we leave it to the listeners as to which one of us is right in our opinion. And we'll sign off. I guess we have one more episode this season
Yes.
and tie it all back together.
Okay. Praise Beethoven. Look out for weirdos. And don't forget to breathe in and out.
Oh, that's a bad one.
You're welcome.
That was the perfect ending. I have nothing to add. Goodbye.